do some cutting to get them to fit. Everything would fit together so perfectly in a factory. You know, factories have perfectly level floors. Get outside the factory where the ground was not so level, and the house was more difficult. But anyway, housing was built, but it did not solve the problems of slums. Slums continued to be around. Your book says that Truman gave so much attention to foreign affairs that he neglected domestic matters. Now, here's something else that happened. What's called the Second Red Scare. Oh yes, before I go to that, I must mention, well, no, that's part of it. The Red Scare. The Red Scare was where we began to fear that the communists were taking over. The number one person was McCarthy. My mother would tell me about it. I mean, this is a little bit before my time. But McCarthy was in the news every hour on the hour, every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, accusing someone of being communist, pointing his finger at this person's a communist. Now, it is known that Hollywood had a lot of people in it who were known to be communist sympathizers. And Ronald Reagan eventually was to combat this and become President of the United States because of his combating of the communists. Richard Nixon also pointed an accusing finger at everybody and saying, you're communist, you're communist. So between Nixon and Reagan and others, but McCarthy was the main one, pointing his finger at everybody and calling everybody communist. And nobody would dare touch him because he pointed a finger at me next. So we had a Red Scare where it looked like the communists were about to take over. Eventually we decided McCarthy was telling multiple lies. He finally was discredited and has been discredited ever since. Now I had a student do a paper on him some years back where they said that this student believed that McCarthy was right and that he actually benefited the country greatly. And that a lot of the people whom he accused really were communist. But nevertheless, he has been permanently discredited.
But he wasn't president?
What's that?
He wasn't president?
No, McCarthy was not the president. He was discredited by the Senate. The Senate voted he was a senator, but the other senators voted to censure him. He gave himself over to alcoholism and died in an alcoholic stupor. But a part of me still wonders, was the man right? In other words, if you take on people like this, you can expect to either be defamed, disgraced, or have an accident, a fatal accident. They'll come and get you. Again, you wonder, part of me still wonders. But he began blaming people as being communist. A lot of innocent Americans were fired from their jobs. College professors were fired. Teachers were fired. Hollywood actors were fired. All this. Now, meantime, the Korean War began, and the United States troops were not prepared to fight, ill-trained. The Korean War began when North Korea invaded South Korea. And Harry Truman decided that he had backed down enough and he was going to fight. And this was a surprise because a lot of people did not believe that, that Harry Truman would fight. But Harry Truman got us involved in the Korean War. I want to say this in Harry Truman's benefit. The Korean War proved to be highly unpopular. But it has given the people of South Korea more than 65 years of freedom from communism, and the South Koreans have prospered. When they finally divided Korea up, the North Koreans got all the good farmland, and the South Korea got the unproductive land. Now, you hear me? I said North Korea got the good farmland. Now, but today North Korea is starving, and South Korea is prospering. Didn't you just say North Korea got, yeah, I just said North Korea got a farmland. Well, why then is North Korea starving? Because of communism, pure and simple. Communism discourages people to work. And the conflict is still going on, and North Korea's president makes news. At times we think he's under control, and then he goes haywire again. At times we think he's under control again, then he goes haywire again. Anyway, the Korean War ended after 3 years in a truce. It did not end in a peace treaty. And every once in a while, North Koreans would shoot and kill a few South Koreans. And all South Korea does is protest. MacArthur, who had led armies to victory against Japan, MacArthur was put in charge of the Korean troops. MacArthur felt like he could do whatever he pleased. Well, he went against Truman's orders. He went against Truman's orders to go too far, too close to China, and got the Chinese involved. This was something that Truman tried to avoid. Then MacArthur insisted that we were going to go into China and fight China in its own territory. And Truman finally fired MacArthur. Now, the firing of MacArthur is a classic case where as soon as people heard it, the initial reaction was, who does he, Harry Truman, think he is? But as time has gone on, we've agreed more and more with Truman. But at first, and for many years afterward, it was looked on as Truman being a very, very bad thing to do. Anyway, Truman, his popularity went down to very, very low. It was to be Jimmy Carter who finally got lower. Truman would not run for president for a third term, even though legally he could have. But he didn't run. Truman he won the election of 1948 to be president in his own right. Then he retired to his home in Independence. All right, folk, with that, is there